is it a good idea?
This is so sad, frankly, and such a miscalculation. America and France, we have a people there who is our natural ally, who proposes to build a true democracy. It would be, or it will be, the second democracy in the area. And we are shy, and we say don't, and we support this failed state, this no state, which is Iraq. And we embolden Turkey, Iran, and Iraq to take strong steps against this little Kurdistan. It is frankly a shame. And for the West, it is a huge mistake. And I was in Erbil the day before yesterday. I was there, I was one of the international observers for this referendum, which, by the way, was a good referendum. According to international standards, it was a fair vote. And from its side, it is so impossible to explain. The situation of the Kurds today somehow reminds me of Israel in 1948. 7 million people besieged by 160 millions of enemy, of big empires, of rogue states. Iran, as far as I know, is still not a democracy. Turkey is less and less a democracy, the Turkey of Erdogan, and no one supports them. This loneliness of the Kurds is, frankly, for me and for any Democrats who listen to us, should be heartbreaking.
And you have a great film about the Peshmerga who have, the fighters who have fought against ISIS with the United States.
They fought for us. The Peshmergas, they were the shield, they were the sword, they were the rampart of the West. And as a reward for their sacrifice, we just close the door to them when they want to come in the club of the democracies.
So anything that Erdogan, the Iranian mullahs, and the Iraqi Shia hate, there must be something good about this.
I think Bernard is correct about the tragic history of the Kurds and the bad treatment they've gotten in the past. And in a just world, they would deserve a better life, a unified political community, and their own state. But the world doesn't necessarily run according to ideals, and the fact is they're scattered among several different countries, each of which is
we are
afraid.
speaking of the Iraqi Kurds. They are not scattered.
but that's
the
what
Iraqi
scares
Kurdish
the-
independence creates a potential problem for all the other countries
Why?
that Kurds
Why?
in their behaviors.
Why?
Because they feel that their Kurds will either want to secede and join the new Kurdish state or get more powers and autonomy inside.
So you've been in the National Security Council. This is a debate where, you know, the realists will say you'll piss off all these countries around. The idealists will say give them a chance. Who's going to win?
I say realists. I'm sorry. And particularly this administration, I think it has to be realists winning over the idealists.
All right,
So if
Bernard.
the realists win, they will win because realism is on the side of the Kurds.
All right. Another question for you. What does it mean that the Alternative for Deutschland, Germany's far-right party, that openly praises some elements of Germany's World War II past, has gotten this very large percentage? It is the third largest party in the parliament now.
Germany, alas, is joining the club of the European countries with a populist ultra-right. Germany was a little back because of the past, because of the guiltiness, because of the super ego which was on the head of the German people. Today, probably with the refugee crisis, which was so well led by Mrs. Merkel, she saved the honor of Germany and of Europe, but there is a backlash and there is this reaction. So Germany is aligning with France, with Poland, with Hungary, with England, the UK, who have this sort of powerful extreme right. And this is rather concerning and sad for us.
What does it mean for Europe?
You know, Macron was in America last week, and he was talking about the problems, not just of France and of Europe, but about the West in general. And he made this point that until we have policies that give the broad middle classes in the advanced industrial countries a sense that they profit from and benefit from the globalization era, we're going to have deep political problems. And so right now, we have a system in which there's, because of refugees, because of economic stagnation, rising inequality, and a variety of other things, we have a sense in a lot of countries that this system isn't working well. And the mainstream parties who have backed the system are losing ground in England, in Europe, in America. It's happening in Germany, too. He held on. Merkel held on. She held on. But the country is in a little bit more trouble.
And you see that in the United States as well, where congressional Republicans have now a 15% approval rating. We have to close it on that. This is a fascinating conversation. Thank you all very much. When we come back, sanctions. They brought Iran to the table for nuclear negotiations, but could sanctions work against one of the most heinous crimes out there? Human slavery. I'll explain. For Satya Nadella, when he took over the company in February of 2014, I'd say he's done pretty well. The stock hit its highest ever price just last month, nearly doubling the company's worth to over $500 billion. Nadella, a soft-spoken engineer and an Indian immigrant, faced the uphill battle of changing a company that was still under Bill Gates's enormous shadow. So what did he do? He hit refresh. That is also the name of his terrific new book. Satya Nadella, pleasure to have you on.
Thank you so much for having me, Fareed.
You say that qualities like empathy, concern, mindfulness are going to be at the heart of Microsoft winning the next wave of technology battles and kind of becoming or maintaining its role as a technology giant. It's a strange thing for the CEO of a technology company to do. So I want to start by having you explain personally how you got to this point of understanding it. And tell me about your mother, who was not a technology person, not an engineer, not even an economist like your dad was, but she was a scholar of Sanskrit and had a very different outlook on life than one thinks of when one thinks of the Indian driving, achievement-oriented parent.
I have learned the power of empathy. It was not some innate capability that I had, but it was life's experiences, whether it was my mother, quite frankly, now I see it more clearly, her influence, or the birth of my son. In the case of my mother, my dad was this, as you said, he was an economist who was in love with ideas.
Ironically, a Marxist economist.
A Marxist economist. And he would be always loved with ideas. He had intellectual curiosity and ambition. My mom, who herself was an academic, was more about stay calm, absorb what is happening, be mindful. In fact, she would always ask me, are you happy? And it was not a banal question. It was like, are you truly able to take it all in? And quite honestly, when growing up, sometimes I would even get irritated. And only now I realize, as I grow each year, that the lessons she tried to teach me throughout are the more enduring ones. And so her influence has been tremendous.
I mean, it's an important point, again, from an immigrant background, because I think of my father, who was a very driven, self-made man. I think if you had asked him, are you happy, he wouldn't have understood the question.
Right.
The point of life was not personal happiness, the point was achievement, success, right?
That's right. And sometimes that's how I interpreted it. Like, how can I be happy? I have to be impatient. I have to go on to the next thing. Her thing, I think, was to remind me that you don't do your best work if you're waiting for your next thing. You've got to do your work today and enjoy it. And if you don't enjoy it or have meaning, which came much later, in fact, from another very interesting source, Doug Burgum, who's the governor of North Dakota now, once looked at me and said at work, saying, you are going to spend more time at Microsoft than with your children. And so you better figure out a way for this work to have more meaning. That was one of those other moments I was perhaps in my mid-30s, and I realized, what is he saying? But it struck me as the best advice that I've gotten.
You had another occasion to be shocked into finding empathy with the birth of your son. Explain what happened.
You know, I was 29 years old. Anu and I were only children of our parents, and so this was our first son, and we were all very excited. The entire family was. And even a few hours before Zain was born, we were mostly concerned about, is the nursery going to be ready, or how is Anu going to go back to her job as an architect? And those were our concerns. And then, of course, life changed that night. And the first...
And he's born. Explain what happened.
There was in utero asphyxiation, and he was born with severe cerebral palsy, and he's quadriplegic today. He's 21 years old. The first couple of years, Fareed, I must say, I struggled. I struggled mostly because I felt something happened to my plan, my ideal. A lot of questioning, why me, why us? Whereas Anu, right off the bat, was all about driving Zain from therapy to therapy and making sure he got the best shot, the best chance. And without schooling me in particular, I got schooled because I saw her and her approach, and then I realized that nothing happened to me. Zain was the one suffering, and it was my responsibility as a father to see that through his eyes and do the best I can. And that, I think, when I look back, was probably one of those moments of hit refresh that really helped shape who I am, at work even. And it's not that, that was the only incident, but I think that's where I'm now a firm believer that your life's experience is what's going to help you develop increasing levels of empathy for more people. And that's what's going to make you a good leader, a good colleague, and a good innovator.
I'll be back in just a moment with much more of my interview with Satya